Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Healthy Home for the Holidays. We're going to be sharing tonight about the upcoming holiday season and ways that we can make the most of this holiday season and make it a worshipful time, make it a sane time, make it a time of making good memories, and a time of shining the light of Christ into the world as his followers. So we're glad you're with us tonight. And let me allow these other two guys who are here with me to introduce themselves.
My name is Michael Campbell. I'm the pastor of children's ministry here at Grace Church, Middleburg Heights.
My name is Mark Valley, and I am one of the affiliated counselors here at Grace Church, also at Middleburg Heights.
And I'm Tom Seffick. I'm the pastor of marriage and family at Grace Church. And we are entering a holiday season that probably all of us have mixed feelings about, depending on our background, our history. And I read that sometimes what happens in the holiday season is people have really high expectations. They have Norman Rockwell type expectations. And what they experience is more of a Norman Bates holiday. Now that's an old reference, but anyway, it dates me. But there are things that we can do to kind of prepare ahead of time to make the holidays a time of great memories with our kids, with our families, with loved ones. And so that's what we want to talk about tonight. So with that, let me invite Mark to, he's going to share some things about how we can practice good healthcare, maintaining our emotional and spiritual health during the holidays. So Mark, if we'll turn it over to you with that.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so as Tom mentioned, the holidays aren't always happy for everyone. They can be incredibly stressful, and for a couple of reasons. So when we think of stress during the holiday season, kind of like four categories show up for me, and I'm sure there's many more, but here's the cream that rises to the top for me is so busyness, family conflict, loneliness, and grief. Again, there's going to be some other areas that I could be missing, but those seem to show up the most common. And so, we think about busyness. We can be overwhelmed by family and social pressure, the whole gift giving, buying, food prep, hosting, attending. We got a bajillion church services. There's just a lot that's going on. And so that's going to be an area where boundaries are really important, not overextending ourselves. But the holidays, especially Christmas, carries this really sort of amped up, busy time where we leave very little margin for error, margin for free time. And so that creates a lot of stress. Family conflict. You talk to any of the counselors here at Grace, and we'll tell you our numbers go up during the holidays. And one of the main reasons for that is time spent with families, and it digs up old stuff. We tend to fall back into those old patterns once we go home, or once our kids come back to our place, it digs up those old things. And particularly this year, so you've got the varying expectations with COVID and COVID protocol. What do you feel comfortable with? What do I feel comfortable with? And then making plans in the midst of that can be overwhelming. It can be really frustrating. Fighting over politics. I said it, politics. That's going to be one of the major sort of areas of family discord as families get together. And I'd like to quote something that my friend Jamie Norton, who started the counseling program here at Grace, who says, "I'm going to value my relationships over my opinions." But this year in particular, with the election, with all the cultural upheaval, that's going to be a major stressor. And then loneliness. So loneliness is if you are the last surviving member of your family, or if you're isolated geographically from your family, or socially isolated, maybe because of COVID. Maybe you're under quarantine, maybe the people that you would otherwise spend time with are quarantined. This is hard. Like, isolation is really, really hard to deal with. It's really important in kind of, planning ahead for the holidays. If you find yourself in that category, widowed, single, divorced, and somebody else who would find themselves in that place of just kind of being isolated, you really want to prioritize reaching out. Reaching out. This idea that loneliness expressed is loneliness shared is no longer loneliness. But we have to take that step and reach out, and sort of seek out, points of connection. I think everyone's kind of burned out on Zoom. I think everyone's kind of, burned out on FaceTime. And, but for many of us, it's the best that we have. Phone calls, writing letters can give you that sense of connection. But for those people who find themselves in that position, it really is important to make your needs known to friends, to family members, to who's ever in your sort of circle. And even as we enter into this season, to kind of to write down who's your support group. Who do you want to be in your support group? Who do you want to be able to reach out to make some calls on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve? Plan ahead for those things, because in the moment, you're probably going to hesitate. They may already have plans. And if you're friends with someone or close to somebody who finds themselves in that category, please reach out to them. They may not feel as comfortable reaching out because they don't want to be a burden. Please reach out to somebody that finds themselves in that position. Invite them over if you're comfortable with it. If you're not, that's okay. We got Zoom for that. We got phones for that. Don't assume that just because they can't come over and spend time physically with you that they wouldn't like a phone call or they wouldn't like to have some other way to communicate. So that's going to be a big one. Grief, the holidays can be so painful if you've experienced a loss recently, or even if it's been years. And it's just those memories come up, and being without, feeling that lack of connection to those loved ones that we've lost. So again, if you're friends with somebody, family members with, or that's a family member, please reach out. Do not assume this person has all their bases covered. You do the loving thing and invite them over, or just spend time talking. If you're able to go to the store together, whatever it is. Again, it's really hard right now and with COVID. And so we need to be creative. We need to get our creative sort of juices going and figure out ways to make connection, to make social kind of touch points. Let's see here. I'm just checking my time here.
Yeah, you're good. Let me jump in. That's really helpful, Mark. And, the body of Christ is always important. I love Psalm 68. It says, God sets the lonely in families, in a family. And so that's always important, but it's even more important, I think in the Christmas season for the reasons that you said. So, and, Grace Church does this annual Blue Christmas for people that are grieving the loss of a loved one. And that's just a great, that's a good example of how, we can come together and kind of bear each other's burdens during, what a difficult season is. So, yeah. So what else you got?
Yeah, it's good. So there's so many things, honestly, that are like in my brain and are on my papers, plural, that I'm trying to like categorize and think, okay, what's next? So if something pops back in my head about grief, I may like interject. So basically in managing stress, there's just, think about planning ahead. You don't want to be caught up in like the last minute scramble, whether it's just in terms of, again, making social connections or, buying the food, buying the presents. You want to kind of map out some to-do lists so that it's not last minute and you're not in this pressured state. Being flexible, things are not always going to go perfect, as we all know. Having, as Tom said, reasonable expectations. You mentioned expectations earlier. It's not going to be a perfect Hallmark movie Christmas. Have reasonable expectations for yourself and how perfect it needs to be. Have reasonable expectations for others and what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. The idea of being kind of present with family and friends, and even with the Lord, versus being perfect is kind of like what we're looking for here. Perfection is not necessary. That's not what kids and family members and friends are going to carry away with them from this season. It's not going to be how perfect things were. It's the time spent. It's the interactions. And if you're in a funk and if you're grumpy because the perfect thing that you had planned is falling apart, that's what they won't remember the laughter from it falling apart. They'll remember the angry, dad screaming at his kids. So we want to avoid that. So like setting limits, also like you said, Tom, don't overextend yourself. You always want to leave margin. Think of a glass filled up completely with water. Like you bump that glass, it's going to spill over, versus a glass that's maybe half full. You bump that glass, there's room for the water not to spill out. And that's kind of what we are. We're just these containers, and we can only contain so much stress, busyness, stuff. So we need to manage our resources well. Checking in with yourself, kind of like an emotional barometer. How am I doing today? How are things going? Where do I feel stressed? And if I am, where am I carrying it in my body? Taking time to kind of breathe through some of that stuff, getting exercise, taking breaks, taking walks, kind of the stuff that you hear, minimizing screen time. A lot of that stuff is going to be, important, and we all know it, but we just tend to fall back into those old ruts. And so, yeah, you want to stay healthy. You want to be, making sure your body's moving, making sure you're getting good food into your system, making sure you're getting rest, but breathe. And with the emotional barometer thing, it's important to know where you're at emotionally, especially as a family gathering is happening or you're rushing out the door to church, because if you're not aware of how you're feeling, you're most likely going to act out of it. And so once we're aware of where we're at, we can do something about it. We can take a step out of the room, breathe, shift our perspective on things, get some space, do what we need to do to prevent ourselves from reacting in a way that's going to cause pain or cause problems. And lastly, perspective. Perspective is key, particularly with stress. So what sort of sets the tone for our situation, for reality, is our perspective, all these things that we have to get done. Is it everybody's expectations? Is it our own expectation? Or is what sets perspective what the season is all about, particularly Christmas? If you talk about the incarnation of Christ, like it has almost nothing to do with the stress that we're under, right? But if we're not in that perspective, and if we're in the perspective of I've got all this stuff I got to get done, or I'm so lonely to the point that I'm consumed with my own isolation, consumed with what a disappointment this is, I am going to fall prey to those feelings, and it's going to be hard getting out of those. Perspective will set you up emotionally, for better or for worse. And so if we're spending time going through like an Advent devotional, and I would defer to the other gentleman here on the call who would be much better, more equipped to point us in the right direction there, but something to sort of set the tone for what this is supposed to be all about, to anchor us in something that's much deeper and much more solid than the to-do list that we have in front of us, and the family stuff or the non-family stuff. Like, that's going to be a safe place to land every time. We want to be anchored in the meaning of Christmas and in the meaning even of Thanksgiving. Like, that's a better place to be. That's where our focus should ultimately be, because out of that place, we're not going to be as stressed. We're just not, because we can put things, in perspective. Like, it's okay. The turkey was kind of dry. The mashed potatoes were dry. Everything's dry, right? Like, it's okay, because like Jesus has come into the world to set me free. And it doesn't really matter about this other stuff. It's fun, it's fun, but like, you can take your licks and keep moving, because we have that deeper truth that matters more. So,
scenes from the National Lampoon Christmas Vacation movie kept popping into my head all the way through what you were sharing. But But very good. You know, just one more thing, Mark, maybe you could share a little bit more is, um, you know, many of us grew up maybe in kind of dysfunctional homes. We have some unhappy holiday memories, maybe in addition to some happy ones. And, you know, we want to be with loved ones. We want to be with family during the holiday season. But some of us have some very unhealthy dysfunctional family members. So you mentioned earlier a little bit about boundaries and whatnot. Any additional thoughts about, you know, this season when you get together with people that are really unhealthy, that maybe push our buttons or are inappropriate, or, you know, any thoughts on how we could maybe navigate that?
Yeah, yeah, and that's always tricky, right, Tom? Like that's always tricky. Um, yeah, I think yeah. So the key word there being boundaries, and the idea is that you want to have that relationship, but within limits, right? Like within safe limits. So maybe, you know, if you're going over to, you know, Aunt Susie's house, and there's always conflict there, and you know, Uncle Billy's, you know, going a little too far on the alky. You might want to have something, frankly, just like set up to go to after that. You know, like, okay, we can't be here for 4 hours. So like you want to almost have something in your back pocket ready to jump to. And a lot of times it's just saying no. It's saying, you know, we're not able to make it this year. Reaching out maybe with a phone call. And a lot of this stuff might be on an individual by individual sort of basis. But yeah, the key word here is boundaries. What are you willing to endure, and what are you not willing to endure? Has this person proven trustworthy in these types of gatherings before? Because if they have not, especially on multiple occasions, that's going to be a good predictor of what, you know, this year is going to be. Probably even worse, because there's even more stress that everyone's under. And so you want to be able to account for that by limiting time shared with that person. Or don't be the only, if you go over to, you know, Aunt Susie's house by yourself, like maybe take a friend with you, you know, to kind of cushion the blow. Usually people are on better behavior when a new sort of person shows up, a stranger that you bring in with you. And it's like, okay, there's a little bit added layer of accountability there, but yeah.
One thing that we've done where we know there's maybe normally tension between two of the family members is to try to communicate ahead of time. Say, hey, you know, we know that this is tough sometimes, and in the past there's been this conflict, and just kind of appealing to them ahead of time. You know, please try to be sensitive and nice, and you know, and not get into it. And
yeah, that's a great idea, Tom. I'm glad you said that, and especially if you are kind of the power broker in your family, if you're the patriarch, matriarch, and you got the pool, it may fall on you to, you know, if it's your son or your daughter or your brother who's coming, you know, to say, hey, look, like we want this time to be a peaceful time. Like, let's set aside some of this other stuff for later. Let's have everybody kind of be on their best behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
And this year especially, it's probably a good idea to proactively tell everybody in your family ahead of time, politics is off limits. We will not talk about politics this year at the Christmas gathering. That's probably a good way to
yes, that's it right there. I mean, that's pretty much this whole talk. Let's just just nix politics for now.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thanks, Mark. Very helpful. And of course, you know, a book like Boundaries, Cloud and Townsend, great practical advice. So maybe we could kind of segue here and maybe share the three of us, if you have maybe a favorite Christmas memory when you were growing up, or a fun Christmas memory. And Michael, I know you have a doozy, so why don't you lead us off there?
Sure. So obviously I've always wanted to have like high expectations as a new parent trying to create the traditions. And, just like you said, when we started, we want these high expectations about what a Christmas morning, what Christmas traditions will look like. So I really anticipated so I have 3 boys, if you're watching at home. And 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? We are going to read Luke chapter 2 every Christmas morning before we open the gifts. And I think that's pretty standard across board. A lot of people do that. But I had a certain way that I thought it would go. And I had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old at that time. So we're sitting in front of the presents, and I take out the Bible and I start to read. And my goodness, it was impossible. And the kids just wanted to open the presents. They did not care at all what I had to say or what Luke chapter 2 said. And my first Christmas tradition as a family went horribly wrong because I got frustrated. And I was like, why do people even do traditions anyway? And these expectations, I'm done with this. Luckily, I kept with it. And as the kids get older, it's a lot easier for them to pay attention. So expectations is huge with traditions.
And maybe age-appropriate expectations.
Exactly. Yep.
But they sounded like very unspiritual 2- and 3-year-olds. That's just my opinion. But
that's right.
We had something funny. I know it was. I know what happened because my mother kept this memory alive in the family, talking about it as we were growing up. But I was probably about 5 years old, maybe. And my parents, on Christmas morning under the tree, my parents had bought me a drum set, like the big bass drum and a couple of cymbals. It was a pretty nice drum set. And we had an old Bell and Howell movie camera. And I remember seeing the home movies of me happily banging away, and hitting the cymbals and all, which I have to wonder what my parents were thinking buying that, that makes so much noise. But at any rate, later that day for Christmas dinner, we had good family friends come over to share the Christmas dinner with us. They had a son who was about a year older than I was. And unbeknownst to any of the adults, at some point during the evening, he had gone over and taken one of the drumsticks and poked a hole in every single one of the drums. And a couple days later, they took out a restraining order against my mother. No, not really. They didn't really do that. But my mother for years talked about how livid she was, and they tried to tape up the drums with scotch. Didn't make quite the same sound. And my mother for years talked about how she wanted to strangle this kid that did that. So who knows what profession I may have gone into if those drums had not been ruined. But at any rate, that to me, that's kind of a funny family. Not so funny for my mom, but kind of funny for me. So yeah, expectations, huh? You have to have realistic expectations. So do you have anything along those lines, Mark? Did you ever ruin anybody's head? Or?
Yeah, so we have a lot of them in my family, particularly on my mom's side, who are full-blooded Italians. And so whenever you get a bunch of Italians together, food will get thrown out the window. And if you're Italian, you've probably done it. If you get emotions worked up, the turkey's going out the window, and it's done that before. But in terms of Christmas memories, the one that actually sticks out most, speaking of unspiritual, you're not going to feel so bad. My most distinct Christmas memory was 1996. We got cable, and me and my brothers, so I'm one of 4 boys, we had lost. It's almost like we had won 10 lotteries. We were tackling each other. We were tackling our parents. We were so excited. We were just losing our minds over this thing. And, looking back and seeing what cable TV is now, like most kids would just, that's so lame, but for us, that was this whole new world had opened. It's almost like getting the internet, this whole new world opens up to you. And I just remember that was one of the greatest highs I had ever felt in my life, which is sad, but it's kind of true.
Well, we want to kind of shift gears a little bit here and talk about more like family specific, married couple specific things, families with kids. What are some maybe good traditions to establish, or ways of kind of keeping Christ central in Christmas, and keeping, worship, leveraging the season to help disciple our kids, understanding salvation and the love of Jesus and things like that. So, Michael, do you want to take it away here and talk about, especially families with kids who are still at home?
Yeah, and that's a loaded question that could take a long time to answer, and I'm happy to tackle it. There's a question that came in that kind of addresses this issue, so I'll read that. It says, "This Christmas feels like it's not going to be as special because our normal traditions can't happen. How do you create new meaningful traditions in a family, and how do you stick with it when it isn't working out the way that you want to?" So I feel that is directly associated with me, because that's what happened to me, because I had those high expectations. But I think where your heart is really important. This, and I'll go through a few questions that I think you can ask yourself or your spouse and your family if this is the way you want to go as a family going forward. But when our traditions help our hearts draw near to God, they are a tool that is functioning rightly. But when our traditions distract our hearts from the true purpose, which is Jesus, then it's time to reevaluate those traditions, or possibly repent for totally going the opposite way that I think was intended. So if there's a tradition, talk about it as a family if it's practical. I know as we go through this chat, we can discuss some traditions that we've put in place in my family. Maybe you guys could share yours or some stuff that we've heard. But a few questions to ask yourself about how to stick with it. Does this tradition help us value Jesus as the greatest gift given, or does it turn our hearts towards seeking lesser gifts, like celebrating the gifts over the giver? Or does this tradition cause us to spend too much time, energy, and money on ourselves, and again, focus away from Christ? So if you want to stick to traditions very briefly, I would say, where is it focusing on? Is it going towards self and trying to become a self mentality, or is it a selfless, pointing to Christ mentality? So when seeking traditions, look through that lens, and that, Lord willing, that will help really kind of refocus how your family does traditions going forward. But so that kind of answers the first part. But keeping Christ in Christmas, this one almost strikes a nerve a little bit, because I think the story of Jesus Christ is not merely a Christmas thing, it's a lifestyle thing. So if, reading Luke chapter 2 on Christmas morning is a very good thing, but that should not be the only time your children hear that story. This is about God becoming with us. So, with the anxiety, like Mark was mentioning, like feeling lonely, the Lord is with us, and he's provided a community. He has provided Holy Spirit to be with us in those times. So just making sure, if we want to include Christ in Christmas, know that it is not just a Christmas mindset, but a whole life, 12 months a year mindset.
That's good. Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing as you were saying that. For us, if we're really trying to walk with the Lord and disciple our kids well, the Christmas season is not that different. I mean, we should be talking about Jesus, his love, his coming into the world, his death for us. I guess one specific way to kind of do that in a special way at Christmas time is just a simple Advent calendar. Like when our kids were little, we'd get Advent calendars where you open the little, cardboard door, and you'd have a verse or something. And I know Focus on the Family for years has provided like Advent readings that go along with an Advent calendar. And that was something kind of special that we would do with our kids at Christmas time, so that the month leading up, you're dripping in every day the truth that Jesus loved us enough to leave heaven and come to earth and die for us. And so that's one simple little thing that we used to do. So
Yeah,
what?
I agree with that. So in regards to discipling our kids and being intentional about having those conversations, we want to make sure that we get to the root of the conversations. And I like to say, like, get to the heart of the matter, and it's a matter of the heart, because our hearts are designed for selfishness ultimately. So another question that came in had to do with, like, how do we get our family to make Christmas not about gifts? And that is challenging. And my kids are still young, so they haven't got quite to the teenage years yet. So I'm looking forward to those conversations. But it really is focusing on the selflessness again, and not selfishness. But a pattern of dying to self is really beneficial. A tradition that my family is really looking forward to is it's called like this money sack, if you will. So you know how, like, you do chores around the house and you get money for that typically. Well, for the month of December, every chore or job or task that your children do, money goes towards this like sack, and this, like, wherever you keep it. And then come the end of the month, the children, after all of their working, gives that sack, the basket of earnings, to either somebody less fortunate or somebody who's been on their heart. Because I think that's another way to show that none of this is yours, and everything that has been given to you is for an outpouring of others. So just one quick example of trying to be selfless over the holidays is being intentional about just others constantly. That's really hard though, easier said than done.
Yeah, that's good. And I think one practical way we can do that is, certainly not the only way, but Operation Christmas Child, which provides, gifts for under-resourced kids all around the world, along with the gospel witness. The gospel, kind of a gospel tract, is included in every single one of those. And that's one simple way. Our kids would participate in that, and we would participate in that. And we are encouraging the Grace family to participate in that. It's a way, just a little way, all of us can be involved in giving and providing the true meaning of Christmas, the gospel story, to kids all over the world. So that's another little way. And while we're on this, I want to share this, because this is one of my, yeah, there we go. There's the Operation Christmas Child information. But and you can just, this year, you can just go online and have them pack the box for you. You just pay for it, and they will pack the box and send it out. So, but along these lines of helping serve and look out for the interests of others at Christmas time, one of my best memories as a father, when our kids were growing up, I think my three youngest kids were still at home at the time, but they were middle school, high school age. So one Christmas, our small group found out about this homeless camp kind of in the woods in our community. And I forget who organized it, but we decided we'd provide a hot breakfast on Christmas morning for, there's something like 30 homeless people that lived in this one area. And so, we talked to our kids about it and said, why don't we do that as a family on Christmas morning? And then we'll come home and we'll have breakfast and our open present. And I don't remember any of them objecting to it. So that morning we got up and we all drove down and helped serve a hot breakfast to the homeless and just kind of hung out with them and talked to some of them. And then we went home and we did our normal gift opening thing. And then later that day, the only time we've ever done this, later that day, we went to a Chinese restaurant, a buffet that my kids really liked. And that's where we had Christmas lunch that day. It was at the Chinese buffet. But that's just a very special memory for me, because it's actually serving and kind of trying to have that mindset of Christ, that he denied himself for our benefit. And so good. So any other thoughts?
I was wondering if like along these lines, and I would kind of run this by you guys. I mean, my oldest is 3, so so we're still working on some of this stuff. But I would imagine that, like, making it exciting to give, like if you were to surprise, like, love bomb, like a family friend who's just had a tough year, and the kids all make, like, pictures and you make cookies and or you pick out something, you know, from the store and make them invested in it. You know, what are your ideas? What do you, you know, what do you think, you know, Aunt Susie, what do you think Aunt Susie would like? Like, what do you think would make her smile, would make her happy, you know, like, and just see if they can get them excited about it. And then even like, I mean, I could imagine like pulling up, like if you go old school St. Nick style, you go up, you throw the president through the window and you dash back to the door and you drive off, you know, provided you don't break the window.
Yeah, don't break the
But maybe if there's a way to get like get them invested through like it's a game or there's something exciting about this.
Yeah.
But I don't know, again, like my
Yeah.
daughter's 3, so.
And that's what I like about
Pretty much, so.
Operation Christmas Child. If they pack, you know, if they help buy the presents, pack the box, they're, you know, it's hands-on and but I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, something that we do for every Christmas, the boys know that they're going to get gifts, but they also have to pick out a gift that they are giving to somebody else. It's like a mandate for us. Like for my 6-year-old Noah, he's going to pick out a gift and we're going to give it to somebody else for Christmas, just because and he knows that it's not like, no, all the gifts need to be towards me. It's been, you know, from day one, that's kind of our approach for it.
That's cool.
Great. I like that. Yeah. So for something I want to just mention, for one of the things that can cause a lot of stress with a married couple, especially if you have kids at home and you're trying to navigate that. And Mark mentioned a couple of these, but we always kind of set limits on how much we were going to spend. We never spent money we didn't have. And money's a big stressor. And this year, for a lot of people, money's tight. Maybe they got their hours reduced or something like that. You know, even if you can't provide all the gifts that you would otherwise like to, stay within a budget. You don't need the added stress, you know, and you don't want to be freaking out all through January when the credit card bills come due. You know, you have to set reasonable limits and don't spend money you don't have. I think it's good to try to start early. We have the advantage today of being able to order gifts online ahead of time. You don't have to. Can you remember what life was like before the internet? You had to go to the stores, and the closer it got to Christmas, the more chaotic it was and the more crowded they were. But anyway, you want to start early. You want to try to plan the stuff. You want to look at your calendar and make sure the calendar that you're not overscheduled, like Mark said. And I think one other thing for couples is, you know, when kids are in the home, it's all about the kids. But it shouldn't be all about the kids. In other words, you know, sometimes our wives and mothers, their hearts are wrapped around their kids, and we all get that. But I try to gently remind my wife, you know, like Elkanah did with Hannah. I tell her, don't I mean more to you than 10 kids or what? No, I say that to her jokingly, you know, but I think it's important for couples as you get into December and you're heading toward Christmas and the kids are getting all excited that you do need to build in a little bit of, you know, we time for you and your wife, and little mini dates and this and that. And, you know, when Kristen sees me crying and whimpering, you know, she knows that I need that me time. But you know, you don't want to neglect each other. You want to make at least a little bit of time for each other and build in a coffee date here or a little walk there, so that, because, you know, it's not all about the kids, really. It's about you as a couple and you as an individual in your walk with God. So it's just good to plan ahead, to schedule ahead, to set spending limits, and to even build in and schedule a date, you know, for the two of you as you get closer to Christmas. So, Michael, what else you got for us?
That was really good. I want to touch on because this is a very hard season, obviously, for everybody, and it's like it's not going to be normal is what everybody's saying, and I totally understand that. Something I want to at least encourage and challenge us as parents and leaders of our home is that, like, if what we think we have is greater than what we think we deserve, then that's where the thankfulness is going to come from. But if we think what we deserve is greater than what we have, that's where the bitterness is going to come from. So in this season, we really need to thank God for every little blessing that he has provided for us.
And that's one thing we used to do when our kids were all together at Thanksgiving, is we'd go around and we'd say, you know, what's one thing you're thankful for? And yeah, counting our blessings is huge, because I know for me, it just elevates my mood. It just changes my perspective. And I need that, you know, I need to remind myself of how totally blessed I am, far beyond what I deserve. So that's something we should all really lean into here during this Thanksgiving time, is verbalizing this, counting our blessings, giving thanks to God, around the table for all of his rich blessings to us. Yeah, that's therapeutic. That's good.
Yeah, the gratitude piece definitely helps manage the stress well. It reduces it, but it also, it models for, our families, the gospel that we are proclaiming. But if we have that, like, kind of complaining, deficit oriented kind of like approach, what are we communicating? Like, what gospel are we preaching at that point? So yeah, I definitely like the gratitude piece there.
Yeah. And one other thing we haven't really talked about yet, but I think the holiday season, especially Christmas, it is a golden opportunity for sharing our faith with other people. And there's still a lot of people in our culture that they don't go to church anymore, but they might go to church on Christmas or Easter. And so we have a phenomenal Christmas Eve service every year that's all about lifting up Jesus and clarifying that what Christmas is really about. Jesus came into the world to save sinners. And so it really is a golden opportunity to invite friends, acquaintances, maybe family members, to come to a really special, good Christmas Eve service with, great music and all that. And because it is an opportunity for witness, and people are a little more open and receptive, I think. So, we should be sensitive to that as we head into the holiday seasons too. What a great opportunity it is to get the gospel into people's lives. And one other memory I wrote down is, and I think the statute of limitations has now run out on this, so my wife and I won't be in trouble. But one year, when we were still living in the Philippines, so we had our 3 older kids, and maybe our youngest son was a baby, but I don't know where we got this idea. I don't think I came up with it. But Christmas Eve, we always wanted to have a special dinner on Christmas Eve. One Christmas Eve, for whatever reason, we told the kids, you can have whatever you want for dinner. And junk food, candy. Now, this was the only time we ever did this. And my kids are all healthy today. But Doritos, gummy bear. We were living in the Philippines, so American candy was available, but it was expensive, but we splurged. And I don't even remember but they all survived. None of them got sick. But this last week, we contacted our kids and said, what are your favorite memories of that? And they love that one. That was one of their special memories for Christmas. I'm not recommending this idea. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying we did that one year. It was kind of a memorable thing for them. But it was right back to spinach the next day. So,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Candy on Christmas Eve night. No, thank you.
Yeah. So any other Any other thoughts or ideas on making the holiday season memorable?
There's a question that came in that I think would be really good for Mark. Says, how can I maintain joy and a good attitude during this challenging time, especially around challenging family and friends? I know we addressed a little bit of that earlier, but maybe Mark, if you wanted to put it succinctly.
Yeah. So, this is hard. Like, it's not easy. I think fighting for joy and maintaining joy is about ultimately where our perspective is. And so we put our eyes on Christ. We put our eyes on what the season is all about. We maintain those grateful hearts. But it's okay to grieve too. It's okay to grieve the loss of what you thought it might be. It's okay to grieve the loss of the family you thought you might have. It's okay to lament those things. So we don't hide them, we express them, but we express them before the Lord. At the same time, we reaffirm that we are loved, that we are secure, that we are sought after by a loving God, and the good things that he has given us. And if possible, you put the boundaries where you need to with dysfunctional family and friends and things of that nature, especially abusive. Like, I want to be very clear about that. Hard boundaries there. But seeking other opportunities to interact and engage with people who are going to be more encouraging, more loving, seeking out those other potential opportunities that maybe you haven't tried for yet, but maybe you're in a Bible study with somebody, or maybe you met somebody at church, or in trying to build into that, seeing if there's anything there. But yeah, it's maintaining that joyful attitude. It's definitely swimming upstream. It's going against the grain, and it's where you're choosing to put your eyesight, where you're choosing to put the emphasis. And it's frankly, it's a lot harder for some folks than it is for others, just based on their circumstance. And the Lord sees that. He sees that. So.
Yeah, that's good. It's hard to have those boundaries, and but nothing says you have to go and spend a 6-hour dinner with lots of alcohol. And what you can do a more limited time and say, hey, it'd be happy to have dinner, but then we're going to have to get going. And so just try to limit that time. And just good self-maintenance is trying to schedule in the life-giving, time with life-giving friends. And because you don't want to say no, you want to be a good witness for Christ, you want to show compassion, but you have to do that within limits, within reason. So yeah, that's helpful. One other thing I want to say too is that the end of the year, the holiday season, Christmas season, there are lots and lots of opportunities to give. There's, we talked about Operation Christmas Child. There are other things. The CMA does an end of the year special offering for the Great Commission Fund, which helps support all of our 700 plus missionaries who are serving in some of the darkest places of the world with people who have never even once heard about Jesus. They have no idea what the reason for Christmas is. So, without going into debt and spending money you don't have, that's another part of the, an opportunity for teaching giving, even getting our kids involved. If our kids get allowance, encourage them to give a little bit of money toward some of these needs, some of these special offerings too, is another thing we could do. So, Michael, any other thoughts on the issues around Christmas and your kids and how to navigate that?
Well, I think there's perhaps an elephant in the room at times in regards to the whole Santa Claus question, or especially in the Christian sphere. It's like, does your family do the whole Santa Claus thing? It's like, well, are we a bad family if we do it? Or are we weird if we don't? Or are we too influenced by our culture? Are we legalistic? So do you do it? So I have three questions that I kind of go by, and we do Santa kind of liberally in ours, more towards like the Saint Nicholas historical approach to it, but we don't want to like totally put down their hopes. But so a question that I want to at least put out there that I think you should talk to your spouse with if you want to do the whole Santa thing is, do you or your spouse have any moral objections to Santa? So like, are you bothered by that it could possibly stir greed within your children, or does it feel like you're lying to them? Do you feel like it's focusing on the wrong things? That would be the first one. Do you have a moral obligation to the Santa Claus thing? The second is, do you think it diminishes the focus of Jesus, which I think is a huge one. We've been talking about that the whole time. And the last one, do you make Jesus central in your family all year long? And I think the issue is, if you don't make Jesus central all year long, you get to December and then it's like Jesus, baby born in a manger, Santa, all the gifts, magic. Like, of course they're going to pick Santa. And I think that does diminish Jesus Christ. So take it for what it's worth. I don't think you should judge somebody for choosing one way or the other, but go with those questions with your spouse and take it from there. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. And I'll just say we did the Santa thing, when our kids were little, but we played up the Jesus thing real big as well. So I don't see harm in doing the Santa thing as long as Jesus overshadows Santa, all year long and through the Christmas season. So
my wife once won in first grade an award for writing a story about Santa converting to Christianity because a little child like left a Bible out for him instead of cookies, and he read it and became a Christian.
Brilliant.
Oh yeah.
That's great.
I still got the Nutcracker trophy at home to prove it. So she, yeah.
Just a couple last things for maybe geared for married couples. I think it's good, however long you've been married and kids or not, but I think it's good. Expectations are so crucial. So I would encourage all the married couples within the next week or so to talk to each other about expectations, maybe talk about, what do you like best about our holiday traditions? What are the best things that we're doing currently for our holiday traditions? Are there any things you don't like what we've been doing for holiday traditions? And are there any new ones we should try out this holiday season? Talk about expectations, prioritize the things you want to do during the holiday season, get them on the calendar, don't overschedule. And this is more directed toward wives. This is something I've learned over the years. But wives, communicate clearly with your husbands what you want help with. If you want help buying the presents, the cooking, the cleaning, wives, verbalize this. Communicate to your husband, hey, I really would like some help with this. And don't be bashful about doing that, because my default setting at holiday time is food and football. And that's, So anyway, I need helpful little reminders. Hey, please help me. Would you please help me with this? And one other word of advice, don't ever buy a toy that has the packaging say some assembly required. Just don't do it. I remember one Christmas and we made that mistake. And there was all kinds of, late Christmas Eve and struggling to figure this out and get it together, and tempers raging. And finally at 2 a.m, I went up to Kristen and said, would you like some help with that? And no, that's not true. That's a bad joke. I'm sorry. That's a bad joke. Any final words of wisdom from you guys before we sign off tonight?
Yeah, so resources would be something that I feel like I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but one of our good friends recommended a book in regards to how to cope as a child through COVID, and that's Alyssa and the Coronavirus. That's the first one. Cosmic Christmas is a great book. A Very Noisy Christmas And for more resources, you can obviously go to the Grace Kids website and get more there.
Perfect. Yeah. Tons of resources, a lot of great marriage blogs. Focus on the family, and go to the marriage section, and it'll have things specifically about Christmas and how to navigate the whole Christmas season. So, folks, thanks for being with us tonight. And hopefully this will help make this a very healthy and just a good holiday season of making memories, of serving, of being generous, of reaching out with the gospel. And so here's to hoping that this has been a help for that. Why don't we have a word of prayer, and then we'll sign off. Michael, Mark, thank you guys for sharing tonight. Appreciate it. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we do lift you up tonight, Lord. You are the reason for all of these holidays, Lord. It's because of your great love, Lord, because of your sacrifice. Lord, thank you that you made yourself poor for our sakes, so that through your poverty we might become rich. Thank you for your amazing grace. And Lord, help us to remember you first and foremost all through this upcoming season. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, God bless you guys. Have a great night.
It's so fun. Tom, I loved your story about the drums. That would have driven me nuts.
Yeah, and I remember seeing